The idea for this video has been sitting in my brain for a long time now, but I hadn't made a video about it yet because I wasn't sure how interesting it would be. But then I remembered that I read out the two political party platform statements for the 1920 presidential election, and realized that nothing could be more boring and long-winded than that, so I decided to go through with this. So for this video, I want to talk about my favorite magazines and publications from the 1920s. I have spent a lot of time browsing 1920s publications for information I can use in my videos. Now, I want to include the first magazine that captured my attention. If you're a regular at this channel, you can probably already guess that I'm talking about Photoplay. Photoplay was the leading motion picture fan magazine of the 1920s. Being called a fan magazine differentiates it from other motion picture-related publications, such as trade papers. Photoplay featured articles on the leading stars of Hollywood, often told in so-called autobiographies. I can't figure out how many, but I would guess that most or all of these autobiographies were actually ghostwritten by others. These ghostwriters would have included the likes of Adela Rogers St. John, who also wrote articles. And fan magazines such as Photoplay were meant to perpetuate the cultish following that Hollywood had crafted for itself. So, while those particular features have questionable historical accuracy, they do provide a glimpse into how Hollywood wanted to project certain film stars to the public, and how it wanted itself to be perceived by the public. But because the magazine, and all other movie magazines, was in cahoots with the film industry, there is rarely anything seriously negative in it, so there's really only one side presented. Aside from the biographical sketches, Photoplay also offered a plethora of other fun materials, such as editorial-like essays about topics such as hair bobbing and certain films. This is also where I got the articles for my Hollywood Homes of the 1920s series. Over the decades, quite a few 1920s film stars have been forgotten, and Photoplay is a great place to find some information and photos of them. I have learned a lot of now obscure Hollywood names just from looking through all of the issues. Perhaps the most interesting information from Photoplay is their annual Medal of Honor award for Best Movie of the Year. They selected a movie for each year of the decade. Sometime I will definitely cover their summary and explanation of why they chose each picture. This is interesting because the Academy Awards only began in 1929, and the first award covered 1927 and 1928 only, so the Photoplay Medal of Honor is really the closest thing to a direct predecessor of the Academy Awards. There are plenty of other similar magazines, such as Motion Picture Classic and Movie Weekly, but Photoplay stood above them all in terms of reputation and quality. In the 1920s, it was always on the top. To find freely available digital scans of these magazines, you can check out the Museum of Modern Art collection on the Internet Archive. Now, let's move to another important entertainment medium of the 1920s, radio. There were countless radio magazines, though most of them focused on the technology side of radio. Sifting through these can be very uninteresting if you're like me and don't understand anything about condensers and transistors and all the other wide assortment of radio mumbo-jumbo. So my picks for this category are magazines that focused more on the industry of radio and the entertainment aspect of the medium. So my first choice is Radio Digest, which started out in 1922 as a once-a-week publication. The issues were pretty short, usually running to about 16 pages each. They usually split attention about 50-50 to radio milestones and anecdotal stories about radio with the technical stuff. But because the issues are so short, it's easy to skip whatever isn't interesting. Then in mid-1926, it switched to a bi-monthly format for about a year, with the page count varying from about 24 to 40 pages roughly. But it also moved away from the technical articles, instead showing featured performers and human interest type stories, as well as a lengthy listing section in the second half. From mid-1927 until the end of the decade, Radio Digest switched to a more unpredictable format, sometimes having a monthly issue and sometimes having a seasonal issue. While there are less of these, they make up for it by being longer, and are probably the most interesting ones. By the late 1920s, radio was really flourishing in terms of entertainment value, so these later issues are especially useful for getting a glimpse into that aspect of radio. And probably the best part of Radio Digest is that it contains a lot of great photos, similar to what movie magazines were doing, though not quite as lavish. But I also like the fact that it sometimes includes transcripts of radio broadcasts that were not recorded, so it's a rare glimpse into the kind of things that were being broadcast, even if it's only in print. Another radio magazine that I think deserves attention is the short-lived publication Radio in the Home, which also had a split-focus format, though it did have quite a bit of technical stuff. What's really unique about this magazine is that it showed some great high-quality photos of random people's radio installations in their homes. There are also some editorial articles that are great for getting opinions about various radio-related topics. And the articles about individual radio performers are important sources for my channel for that kind of topic. The information seems more reliable than that of movie magazines, since radio hadn't quite developed that same cult-like following that Hollywood had already cultivated. You can find Radio Digest and Radio in the Home, as well as so many more radio-related magazines, on the website worldradiohistory.com, which has meticulously scanned hundreds, or more probably thousands of issues of magazines related to vintage radio. And I'll definitely make more videos using articles from them. I'll leave a link to that site in the description of this video, so please check it out. Other radio magazines I would recommend are Radio Topics, What's on the Air, Radio Review, and Radio News, which is famous for its cover art. Okay, now let's move away from the mainstream a bit to The Crisis, which was the official publication of the NAACP, one of the leading organizations for civil rights for black people in the US. Each issue was pretty short, running to between 40 and 60 pages roughly, including advertisements. But everything in every issue is related to Black America, though pretty much all of the contributors were black intellectuals, so the articles weren't exactly written by average black people. But nonetheless, the 1920s issues are a fascinating look into the early Harlem Renaissance, with articles about black art, literature, performers, achievements, the civil rights struggle, and even an occasional criticism of other groups like Marcus Garvey's UNIA. The editor of The Crisis was W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the main inspirations for the later civil rights movement decades later. Each issue of The Crisis includes an editorial by Du Bois himself, and usually an additional article or two written by him. The Crisis was not afraid of tackling difficult issues such as lynching and racial violence, both of which could still be found throughout the 1920s, but especially in the early years of the decade. I have already made a few videos about some articles from The Crisis, but I will definitely make more, especially because there has been an increased interest in race studies in recent years, and I hope I can give this historic publication more exposure. Next, for some interesting opinions about contemporary issues and events, there's a now obscure magazine called The Forum, which was pretty academic and served as a medium for people to share their opinions on every conceivable topic, including social, economic, scientific, religious, and political issues of the day. If you've seen my videos about the debate on radio, those two articles came from The Forum. There's also a related publication called Current History that mostly covered modern developments in the world, covering all regions. Because some of the information about history is outdated or can be expanded on with hindsight, it is not entirely reliable in terms of historical accuracy, but it can be an interesting foray into historiography for those brave souls who are interested in that kind of thing. Both The Forum and Current History are very dense, so I would only recommend them to people taking a very deep dive into the history of the 1920s, especially political and economic topics. The next couple of magazines I want to talk about are more recent discoveries for me that were only uploaded to the Internet Archive within the past year or so. The first of these is a satirical American magazine called Judge, which is similar to the British magazine Punch, which also focuses on satirizing modern culture and recent events. Judge is filled with great illustrations that I have often featured on my Instagram page. Judge would often have themed issues that focus specifically on one topic. There were multiple issues focusing just on the crossword craze in the mid-1920s. Nearly every illustration and essay talks about crosswords in some way, and they can be pretty absurd. But I doubt any other themed issue is as absurd as the issue dedicated just to satirizing the KKK in a demonstration of vintage dark humor. I came across this page from that issue a while back, and I knew I had to include it somewhere just for how weird it is. This illustration imagines a wacky world where, God forbid, the KKK influenced everyday fashion. I think that Judge can really help a modern reader better understand some of the many social issues in America in the 1920s, and some of the things that were going on then, through satire. Likewise, for British viewers, Punch is similar, but with more British-style humor and topics. Both of these can be found on the Internet Archive. and I'm trying to find a way to do more with these magazines on this channel somehow. And lastly, another recent discovery that I definitely want to use for videos in the future. This is a forgotten weekly publication called Midweek Pictorial, which was related to the New York Times. I've looked through only a few issues, but it's clear that there's something special, especially in retrospect. Each issue almost entirely consists of photographs of various random things going on in the world in the 1920s. They mostly cover current news stories and feature fascinating snapshots of what was going on everywhere, from serious stories to fun ones. This is probably the most accessible historical publication that I've mentioned in this list. It really has something for everyone. The digital scans are very high quality, so you can see every picture pretty clearly. So in the future, I want to make a video for each issue, so we can all go through a pictorial history of the 1920s together. Right now, the Internet Archive has every issue from 1920 to 1925, but I expect the rest will be uploaded in the future, once they are officially in the public domain. The account that uploaded all those issues has uploaded about 2 million historical texts. It uploads like hundreds of issues a day every day from an uncountable number of old publications from various decades. These publications cover every imaginable topic, so if you're looking for research material for science, history, business, politics, economics, or anything else really, you have to check out this vast digital collection. And they have been organized into separate collections, so you can narrow down your search to a specific magazine. You can even find every issue of the New York Times up to 1925, something I will use for future videos as well. I'll leave a link to it in the description. And again, I'll mention the site for the radio magazines, worldradiohistory.com. It has the standard magazines as well as more technical stuff, and publications from local stations, contemporary books on radio, etc. So if that's your thing, you gotta check it out. And I'll leave links for the other magazines I talked about in this video as well. So that's all for this video. I just wanted to share some of these primary sources with you just in case you're a nerd like me who wants to look through them for fun, or if you're trying to get material for a research paper or project. I had never heard of many of them before starting this channel, so I wanted to spread the word on to you. Well, that's all for now all you sheiks and gals out there, but stay tuned for more tales from the Jazz Age.